That's a good picture of us. This is Bobby and I on the Middleman's Lawn, and we're both pregnant.
Vintage photos stir memories of a golden past, an American dream come true. Sam and Rose Schnitzer's children remember well the pride, prosperity, and unconditional love of their youth. Their oldest son, Manuel, has high praise.
I don't think I could have any better parent than him.
My father was looked up to by all of his friends, and he'd have them stopping by to visit and get advice and go over things with them. And there was just a very, very strong connection with family. And we had always visiting cousins or uncles or aunts. My father had his brothers and his sister living at the time I was growing up. And we would go visit one of them all the time, and we were visiting back and forth.
Sam Schnitzer believed in himself. He is viewed by some historians as the most successful of all Jewish immigrants to Portland. Harold Schnitzer explains how his father grew up one of 5 children in a little town southeast of Warsaw.
The one community that my dad came from is still available. You can see it on a map of Poland. It's called Trianivka, and it's in an area called Vilna Gubernia, which is the Polish name for the state of Vilna. My mother's community came nearby from a little town called Czartorysk, and it too is on a map. You can see it. The Polish country at the time was very strong Catholic, and there were very, very strong anti-Semitic riots at time to time. And these small little Jewish communities had a hard time surviving. So life was very, very difficult for those people. They were not allowed to own land under the Tsar. They were not allowed really to own businesses. So they had to survive as best they could. And my dad's family had a grain mill, which was a very small little operation, where they had a horse that went around a great big millstone grinding wheat.
In a 1935 interview published in the Oregon Journal newspaper, Sam explained how he was drafted into the Russian army in 1903. He said, "Right then, Russia was preparing to fight Japan, but I didn't feel that I wanted to kill any Japanese or have any Japanese people kill me. So I watched for my chance, and without consulting the captain of my company, I resigned one night and escaped to Austria." An uncle sent Sam $110 to pay for a sea passage to America. It was 1904. He was 24 years old.
When he came into this country in Ellis Island, he didn't have 1 penny. And you can't get in the country without having, they know that you're not going to be a charge of, and HIAS, called Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, they took him and guaranteed that he would never be a cost to the government, and he told us to be charitable, all of us. He says, I don't care what it is, if they want something, at least give them $2, but he says, be charitable.
And so began the remarkable tradition of charitable giving, which is still a hallmark of the Schnitzer family today. Ellis Island was the primary U.S. immigration station from 1892 through 1943, and the decade Sam Schnitzer passed through was the height of European immigration. Over 8 million people streamed past the Statue of Liberty to make a new home in America from 1901 to 1910. In New York, Sam got a job at a yard goods shop which paid $4 a week. With 4 other young men, he rented a room for $7.50 a month. There were no beds in the apartment, so Sam often slept on the store counter. After a year, he managed to save $85 and bought a second-class ticket to Portland. After a short stint in the growing Rose City selling tobacco for Sam Noodleman, his entrepreneurial spirit kicked into gear in Astoria.
He became sort of a little junk man here in Portland at the time. and he heard about Astoria being a big growing city with all the lumber trade and all the fishing trade. So he went to Astoria. And, he did not speak English very well, and he went around picking up at that time as a junk man with a sack on his back. He would pick up old clothes, metal, so forth. He also would go as far as Fort Stevens, which is quite a distance from the city of Astoria. But he would get a ride with a farmer on a wagon or whatever, and he became very good friends with a sergeant at Fort Stevens. He used to say that the soldiers used to tease him. Knowing that he was Jewish and that he was not supposed to eat shellfish, they would say, well, we'll give you this little junk here, this metal, etc., Sammy, but you got to try these oysters. So he tried the oysters, and he liked them. They went down pretty good. They tasted pretty good, even though being kosher, supposedly, he enjoyed oysters, and he did for the rest of his life.
After 3 years in Astoria and a $1,600 plus nest egg, Sam came back to Portland and started a junk business. With partner Henry Wolf and another who bowed out soon after, the men opened the Alaska Junk Company with a 25-foot frontage building at 227 Southwest Front Street. With his future secure, Sam was ready to settle down with a family and wrote his father to send him a bride. Gilbert Schnitzer explains.
I want to tell you the story about how my father met my mother. He actually intended to get her sister, an older sister, and she was committed to a man in Baltimore. So when the family sent my mother to Portland, my father didn't realize or didn't know that this was his bride. But my father was very lucky because my mother was a beautiful woman and her sister was not that attractive. She was heavy and married a man in Baltimore, big and heavy. My father being over 5'2", my mother, size-wise, was a perfect match. They had a nice, respectable life together. Of course, my father being dominant, she always conceded. My mother was an interesting woman. She loved opera. On Saturday, she watched the Texaco program.
Listened
to it. At that time, it was radio. They didn't have television. And she listened to it. And also, when television came in, she watched it on television. She also liked wrestling matches. It was interesting how she loved to see men wrestle. It was an interesting option there. You know, one was music and culture, the other was the opposite.
Although he had never met her, he knew that his father would pick somebody that was proper for him. And I don't know to this day whether or not they ever sent a picture of my mother. We never asked my father these details, unfortunately. My dad sent money for a ticket and money for her for a train to come from New York to Portland. So she was really the bravest of the family in my mind. We are very, very lucky in that she was a beautiful woman, a blonde, good-looking woman, and about the same height as my dad. So she finally came by train, and if you can imagine, you know, getting to Portland and getting off the train and looking down and seeing this fellow that she's going to marry, she hasn't got a ticket to go back either. But as it happened, he was a nice-looking man, too. And he was a very good husband. So they married, and the friends helped her with jewelry. She borrowed jewelry from one family and so forth, and we have a picture of their marriage, of the two of them, and they're interesting-looking, handsome young people.
With no English but enormous energy, Rosa Finkelstein became a Schnitzer and started her life and large family in Portland. Rose had a total of 9 children. 5 sons and 2 daughters reached adulthood. A son, Benjamin, died at about 4 years of age, and a daughter, Rebecca, was a little over a year when she died. Benjamin's death hit Rose hard, as Gilbert remembers.
My mother was a sick woman. She actually had 9 children. I had a brother who was run over at 4 years old, the number 2 brother. He nagged my mother for a candy bar. It was 5 cents at that time. And my mother gave him the 5 cents. He lived on 1st and Arthur Street in South Portland. And she saw him run over, and that created an image in her life which she never got over. I had a sister who died after birth. She had an impairment in breathing and lived, I think, for about a year, maybe 18 months. That's between my sister Molly and me.
Sam and Rose Schnitzer's children were at the center of their lives. They valued education, both secular and religious. All 7 children attended college. Several sons and both daughters did graduate studies in fields as varied as social work and dentistry. But the sons were ultimately drawn to business. By the mid-30s, the oldest, Manuel, was managing the Alaska Junk Company.
I remember taking lunch to my father, who used to live on 2nd and Arthur, and I would walk down when I was 8, 9 years old, and take the lunch in a basket to my dad downtown. Today you couldn't do that, you know, a young boy. And then I remember my father, I was 10 years old. He started teaching me to wait on the customers. And I had a yardstick, and people would want to buy a pulley or some belting. He says, Manuel, everything is 50 off, half off. So that's the way I learned business. See, by the time my brother Morris and I were 16, we were wheeling and dealing. Customers used to want to see my mother. Take them up there and says, hello, Mrs. Schnitzer. She says, how old are you? She says, I'm 67. So I laughed, and she says, why are you laughing? I said, nothing, Mama, but I'm 60 years old.
Manuel had 2 daughters with his wife, the former Edith Rothstein from Seattle. He kept the family business going through World War II. An injury to his left arm from an auto accident resulted in a 4F deferment from service. He was the only son not drafted or in college during the war. Manuel and his brother Leonard credit their father with their success.
He told Manuel once when he went out on the road to do something, he says, go out and do something. He says, I don't care if you even lose, but do something. Don't do nothing. And he was a risk taker, and most of the time he was successful. But he was aggressive, and he wanted to build. His greatest desire was to see each kid go to college. It was important that they get an education. He wanted to provide that for each of them, and he wanted to provide a good life for each of his children. He was not selfish.
The one reason that I think all of our brothers were pretty successful is that he let us do what we wanted. I remember when my brother Harold wanted to get out of the business, and I didn't want to buy him out. And he went to a lawyer, and I didn't do anything. And one day he comes with me, with Harold. He says, Manuel, why don't you buy him out? I says, Papa, I'll buy him out in 15 minutes. And I made a deal with him in 15 minutes. And then he left, and I cried. Yeah, but I think he did the right thing, because he and my brother Leonard would never have gotten along.
Manuel's wife Edith died in 1996. He wants to leave a legacy of honor.
I think they say that whatever his word was, it was his state as a bond, you know? You gotta be honest, That's what he told us. Be honest, and when you say something, you observe it. That was, I think, the best you can say.
So you'd like to be remembered as a man of your word.
That's right. And I think I was a pretty good businessman, too.
Morris Schnitzer was educated in business and engineering. With the help of his father, Morris got a bank credit and in 1934 set up Schnitzer Steel Products. He rented 14 acres on Yeon Avenue, which the company later bought, and the business was on its way. Morris served in World War II with the Air Force Supply Division in England and France. He met Mildred Marcus from Los Angeles in 1947. The two soon married and had 3 daughters.
When I married Morris, September 28, 1947, we were very happily received. His family, his parents especially, were very glad that he was happy. As a matter of fact, on our first anniversary, they gave Morris this diamond ring because he was so happy. But I said to them, I'm the one that made him happy. I should have been given it. But I was very happy for him. And when he died, I promised this to my youngest child. As the girls got engaged, we gave them a diamond drop. And she preferred to wait, even if it would be 100 years, until she'd like to have this instead. But that's the ring he got. When he showed it to the brothers the next day, they all said to Papa and Mama, we don't want pajamas anymore for our birthday. We'd like a ring. And Papa said, go down to Zell Brothers and pick out whatever you want. It was very exciting, and it was very friendly and very warm and very, we admired them all, each other, and I admired what was going on, and I didn't interfere. None of us did. And that's why Papa said, 5 fingers on one hand makes a fist, and each one individually is not as strong. We had holidays at Papa and Mama's, 2 days for Rosh Hashanah and 2 days for Passover. And when we were working in the kitchen helping Mama, she said, I don't blame you girls for not changing dishes and doing all of this. It's a lot of work, but I already started it and it's been going on so long, I can't change. But I would never have done it at the beginning if I were in your place.
Family was a top priority for Mildred and Morris. He died in 1980, but Mildred keeps their values alive every day and hopes her children do the same.
Because I like them to be friendly in their own family and with their own in-laws, and I like them to do charitable work and be good daughters. I have 3 daughters, and everything should be on the same category as we did. And they are all happy with their in-laws and their children, and they do a great deal of mothering and a great deal of civic commitment. I would hope that they would remember that I was Morris's wife and the mother of these 3 wonderful girls, and they have followed through with what I've done, and I think they've gone beyond what I did, and I admire what they're doing.
Edith Schnitzer Goodman has fond memories of her past. The oldest daughter, she was usually dressed in matching clothes with her younger sister Molly. The two helped Rose with their younger brothers.
We were nominated, Molly and I, to be the caretakers of these 2 boys. And we'd rock them to sleep and that sort of thing. I don't think there was any problem about that, except that taking care of Harold first, and quite a bit of time put into it. And so when I was told there's to be another one, I said, oh, golly, not again. Leonard doesn't know that. But it worked out fine. We helped a lot. My father was an extraordinarily bright person, and he kept saying his eyes were bad. And he said, if only I had good eyesight, I could read, I could do more. And he always said there was so much he could have done if he was handicapped a little, you see. but he did well. My father impressed us. I don't know whether Leonard remembers that we couldn't fight. He said that was one thing he would not allow us to fight with each other. And I don't remember us ever fighting, our children fighting. And to this day, they are very fond of each other. There's a lot of caring, and I think it's brought down. I think it goes down generation after generation if you have it.
Kitchen memories with her mother are close to Edith's heart.
We'd walk home from Lincoln High School, and she'd have lunch and dinner. And Friday was a very busy day because she had to bake the bread and the coffee cake and you know, all the things that go with Friday night dinner.
Edith took on her role as wife and mother of 3 children after she married her husband, Morton Goodman.
Met Edith at a reception that was held for her sister in the family home on Vista Avenue. And I saw this pretty little blonde girl, and the next week I think we had our first date, and the next month we were engaged. It was kind of a rapid fire thing, but it worked out beautifully. Grandma Schnitzer was a sweet little old lady, very pretty, and very, very affectionate to all of her children. And to me, I was the newcomer. I was not shown any special attention at the time. I was just treated like a member of the family. Was taken into the kitchen, and Grandpa Schnitzer was always with his hat on, often as I remember him sitting at the table drinking tea and being fondled and cared for by his affectionate family. He a very sweet old gentleman. I've never heard him scold his children.
Edith says her parents helped mold their children into caring people.
And you see, I have this caring family that call all the time. See, they call us or we see each other. And not very many people have that. I think I'm very lucky. I really do.
Edith is still very close to her sister Molly. Both attended Reed College. Molly graduated with a degree in social sciences and later received a master's degree in social work from Columbia University. She met Bernard Levin on a trip to Los Angeles, and 8 days later, they were engaged. Their union was strengthened by the addition of 3 children. We spoke with Molly by phone from her home in California.
My mental health is pretty good, and it's because